First, it's worth mentioning the endless rain. The character is constantly under the effect of dampness, which means health and stamina regenerate more slowly, and you won't be able to dry out with a regular fire, since precipitation will immediately extinguish it. But a large fire burns well in the rain, so if you need a constant source of heat, you can put one up. And in this biome, you can't grow anything in the garden except for turnips. Next up is the fire geyser that I mentioned a little earlier. It is a small elevation from which an endless column of fire erupts from the center. It's impossible to put it out. This place serves as a spawner for surtlings and a good trap for the abomination. By digging around the fire, you can create a farm for cores and coal. The next feature of the swamp is the various stone structures. They can look different. Mostly these are round towers, but there are also stone mines with spiral staircases going down. But since the swamps are at the same level as the ocean, all these basements are flooded, which means you can't loot them. You can't. In the towers, a bunch of bodies can sometimes appear, which is the Draugr spawner, and such structures could be avoided, but sometimes you can find the Wigweiser for the third boss in them. By the way, this is the only structure on the surface where the Wigweiser can be found. It doesn't spawn in other monuments. In addition to stone huts, there are also wooden ones. Sometimes a ghost can spawn in one of them. You can tell that it's inside by the characteristic blue glow coming from within. So if you don't want to fight, it's better not to approach. If there's no glow, then we can approach and search the chest under the ledge. Next up is probably the most dangerous feature, Draugr spawners. From the outside, it looks like a pile of stones. Inside their perimeter, there can be piles of bodies and heaps of bones. So both Draugrs and skeletons spawn here right away. And sometimes there might be a chest lying in the center. There's a chance that it may contain items that you see on the screen right now. These piles can be destroyed, but if you want to cook a lot of sausages, you can just place spawners and beat the Draugrs with PKD. You knock out the guts, make sausages, and everyone is happy. And the calling card of the biome is the creepy stone statues covered in moss. Basically, it's just decoration and serves no function at all. And contrary to many misconceptions, they don't point the way to the sunken crypts. It's nothing more than a myth created by the author of the article on the Russian wiki. And contrary to many misconceptions, they don't point the way to the sunken crypts. It's nothing more than a myth created by the author of the article on the Russian wiki. Let's move on. And finally, the most important point in the swamp, the sunken crypts. The structure is made of black stone, and the locked iron gates at the entrance block the path of any wandering seeker. To unlock these gates, you need a swamp key, which drops after defeating the ancient. By opening the gates, we gain access to the dungeon. Inside, we are immediately greeted by a fork in the road, to the left, straight ahead, and to the right. Typically, the passages are always piled up with a bunch of dirty scrap. This is the main source of scrap metal. You can break these piles with any pickaxe, even one made from deer antlers, so crafting a bronze one isn't necessary at all. When you break the pile, scrap metal, leather scraps, and dried bones will drop out. Since the crypts are sunken, there will be water all over the floor, so if you want to set up a campfire, you need to do it on an elevated spot. And if you don't have any wood or stone for that, you can break the hanging roots and stone chests. Inside the chests, there might be loot that you see on the screen right now. Blobs and Draugrs lurk in crypts, clear piles for safety. Each crypt is unique. Sometimes there can be a pile of bodies here, and to safely clear the crypt, you first need to break those piles. Just like with the dungeons in the Black Forest, all the crypts are procedurally generated, which means each one will be unique. Personally, I clear these crypts like this. I slightly break apart the pile of scrap. Then, if I see an enemy behind it, I pull out the deer sorrow and hit until the enemy is destroyed. Then I pull out the pickaxe again and continue breaking apart the pile. So, step by step, passage by passage. Pay attention to these kinds of passages too. There are jewels lying around that you can sell to merchants. Also, in such corridors and large rooms, a wraith can spawn for the boss, so if you couldn't find it on the surface, you have a better chance of finding it in the crypts. The third boss in the game is the Mass of Bones. Its altar is a huge humanoid skull with acidic sludge bubbling in its lower jaw. By placing 10 dried bones into it, you will summon the Mass of Bones. The boss looks like a large green sludge with 2 limbs and a massive head, where 2 human skulls serve as its eyes. Throughout the body of the mass, the remains of various creatures are scattered, but the most notable is, of course, the skull of an unknown creature on its right shoulder. The boss has 3 types of attacks. The first attack is a strike with its limbs against the player. It can hit with either its left or right paw, dealing physical damage. The second attack is when it vomits underneath itself, thereby spraying poisonous fumes over the area. This attack poisons the player, so it's essential to bring mead as an antidote for the fight. And the third attack is summoning. It tears a chunk out from under its armpit and throws it towards the player. From this lump of flesh, blobs and skeletons emerge. At first glance, it may seem like there's nothing to worry about, but they can gradually damage you, which means your character's health won't be replenished. So it's best to deal with them as quickly as possible. This boss is easily defeated with crushing damage. If you have a knife, spear or sword, then let's remember. An iron club is perfect for this. Climb the skull and hit it from above. It stands helpless, so just poke it slowly. This method isn't respected by experienced players, but who cares if you're playing for yourself? She stands right next to you and can't do anything, and all you can do is slowly pick at her. In general, this method of killing isn't really respected by more experienced players, but who cares if you're playing the game for yourself? But even with this method, don't forget to drink the antidote. It will really save you. After killing the mass, it drops a trophy and a darling. By hanging and activating her trophy, we get the most unbalanced power of the Fallen, namely high resistance to physical damage. This means that even the fiercest enemies in the game will take a long time to kill you. Of course, you can talk a lot about the pros and cons of this buff, but I think there's really no point in that. Like the other buffs, it lasts for 5 minutes, and the cooldown for reusing it is 20 minutes from the moment you activate it. The soul is needed to search for treasures and ore that are underground. Now you'll be able to know more precisely where the Viking burial chest is located in the meadows, where a pile of dirty scrap is lying in the swamp, and where the silver vein is on the mountain. Well, that's a whole different story.